Welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we are so glad to have you here. In a showdown at Rider University in Lawrenceville, Democrat Mikie Sherrill and Republican Jack Ciattarelli squared off in the first general election debate for New Jersey governor. The 90-minute clash, which I had the honor to moderate, drew over 1,600 spectators. It was the largest in-person governor's debate in New Jersey history. The town hall-style format featured questions from the audience as well as panelists. It aired live on New Jersey and the New Jersey Globe platforms. Joining me now to discuss the debate and all of the fallout is one of the debate panelists, Micah Rasmussen, director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. Micah, good to see you.
You too, Laura. What a night.
What a night. What a night. So your impression of debate night, it was quite an event. I mean, we had the debate and we had the experience at Rider University. So I just want to kind of get your impressions.
It was a huge night for Rider. It was a huge night for all of us. So much work has gone into it. And I really have to compliment you, Laura. You kept such a nice, lively pace going the entire night. You didn't let anything get bogged down. It really was an interesting debate. We covered so much ground. I was thrilled with the questions from the audience, far superior than the questions that we had to ask, because it's what is on real people's minds. And it was unlike anything New Jersey had ever seen before. We haven't done a town hall format with questions from the audience. It really was a home run from my perspective. I think from a voter education perspective, certainly from my students' point of view, they had an unforgettable learning experience that they could never otherwise have. I was thrilled to be involved. It was something that came off, and all the hard work that we had put into it really paid off.
Right, and that's the thing, is we want to inform voters and really give them a look at the candidates, not just, from a moderator's point of view, but from hearing from people in the community. So let's start at the very beginning. Opening statements, that often sets the pace for the candidates. We've got a clip from that, so let's take a look, and then I'll get your thoughts on that.
Good evening, New Jersey. My name is Micah Sherrill, and I have a different kind of background, so I'm going to be a different kind of governor. I'm a former Navy helicopter pilot, federal prosecutor, member of Congress, and Jason and I are raising our 4 great kids. And so that's why I am laser focused on driving down costs for families like yours. I'm going to declare a state of emergency on day 1, freezing your rate hikes. I'm going to demand transparency and accountability from our government to save you time and money. And for those of you who have been following Jack's race, you've heard a lot of nonsense. And you're going to hear a lot more tonight. But there's a clear choice. In 1990, Jack took his first of many votes to raise your taxes. That was the same year I took my first of many oaths to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. He'll support abortion bans. I'll support your personal freedoms. He'll do whatever Trump tells him to do, and I will fight anybody to work for you. Thank you.
Jack Ciattarelli, it is your turn to deliver your opening statement. Jack Ciattarelli.
New Jersey, we need change. We need a hands-on CEO governor who's from New Jersey that knows exactly what needs to be done and is willing to do it. Overwhelmingly, New Jerseyans feel that we're heading in the wrong direction. Here's why. There's an affordability in this crisis because of the taxes you pay, and now because of your electricity rates. There's a public education crisis in this state. We've slipped from 2 to 12 on the National Report Card because we no longer focus on critical life skills and vocational training. There's a public safety crisis in this state. Nonviolent crime is through the roof. Break-ins, car thefts, flash mobs in our malls and Jersey Shore. There's an overdevelopment crisis in the state where we're taking Garden right out of the Garden State with all the overdevelopment. We're the worst place in the country in which to do business. These are the issues. My opponent will blame all these things on the president. Make no mistake. The party that's controlled our legislature for 25 years, the party that's controlled the executive branch for the 8 years are the reason why we are today. I look forward to discussing my specific plans on how to fix New Jersey.
Okay, so Micah, when you have opening statements, it's interesting. Both of them kind of alluded and touched on each other. Is that the best way to have an opening statement, or is it better to just look at the audience and say, here's what I'm going to do, and not mention your competition?
You know, it's interesting. One of the things we noticed is that there wasn't a lot of interaction between the two. It was almost as if what they had practiced was go out, do your own thing, don't be distracted, and make your own points, and don't worry about what the other candidate is saying. We didn't know if that's how it was going to go. We thought that they might mix it up. We thought that they might get close to each other or close to the people asking questions. They kind of kept their distance and played it safe, and I think we saw that. We think they stuck to sort of their campaign, their overarching campaign themes in this opening section. And that probably is what you can expect to see. But as much as we possibly could throughout the night, we're going to want to get them off those talking points. You know, it's natural in the opening statement. You're going to start with what your campaign is about.
Yep. You're going to have those talking points. You want to make sure you hit everything. Well, when we went to our panel, David Wildstein, editor of the New Jersey Globe, asked the candidates to commit to not raising the sales tax. Let's listen to what they had to say and how they handled that question.
We are not raising the sales tax here in New Jersey. What we need to do is lower the income tax and the property tax here in New Jersey. Those are the most burdensome taxes we pay. Pennsylvania's flat tax is 3% on personal income. Our highest bracket is 10.75. Pennsylvania's property taxes on average are $3,000 less per home than ours. What is it that Pennsylvania is doing that we're not? They give Republicans control from time to time. I think that's what they do in Pennsylvania. Listen, it took us 238 years to get the $36 billion budget. In 8 years, we went from $36 billion to $59 billion. Can anybody tell me their life is better off than it was 8 years ago? Has anything gotten better? I've been here for 64 years. 64 years. I never remember it being this bad. The affordability crisis, look at your property tax bill, look at your monthly electric bill. Public safety, public education, overdevelopment, and the worst place in the country to do business. That's why we are where we are today.
64 years, and for over half that time, he's been raising taxes on all of us. You know, I can see why your career as a CPA was so short-lived, because your math just doesn't add up, Jack. So that's why, as we look at a $5 billion hole that we're facing from the federal government, as we're working hard to make sure that we're paying into pensions, at least one of us, to make sure that people have the hard-earned dollars that they've earned over time, as we're working to make sure that we have the best public school system in the nation, I'm not going to commit to anything right now, because I'm not just going to tell you what you want to hear. Now, Jack raises sales tax all the time, and yet tonight he said this because, like we know, he'll tell you whatever you want to hear. Well, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to be fiscally responsible with your money. I'm going to drive down your cost at every level, and I'm going to make sure your kids have great opportunities here in the state of New Jersey.
So, Micah, one of the things that I noticed as moderator, a lot of times Jack would come out, and Jack Ciattarelli would come right out and answer a question, or he would make a reference to it. So he came out and said, no. Mikie Sherrill is saying, I don't know. Do you see pros? And, you know, what's your take on how they address this question? Because it's the biggest issue is affordability in the state.
Well, it was an important moment for Jack Ciattarelli to have to swat this back, because there's been a lot of advertising from the Sherrill campaign and from other Democratic groups saying that he has been talking about raising the sales tax to 10%. And in fact, he has talked about that. And so now in this debate, he's clarifying that does not mean that I'm raising the sales tax to 10%. He needed to make that point. He needed to make that emphatic, and he did that. The problem for Mikie Sherrill, and I understand not wanting to get boxed in and answering a question that you're asked that you're not prepared or you haven't thought about. I think that's one of the things we can say about her speaking style. She's very cautious. She doesn't want to say something until she's thought about it. I get that. But the problem for her, unfortunately, is that she's out there making the charge that he's going to raise the sales tax, and she's not prepared to say that she won't. So that was an inconsistency, and that was a missed opportunity for her to say, there's a clear contrast between the two.
Yeah. All right. Now, you, Micah, ask a question when it comes to vaccines. Let's take a look and see how they responded.
A child died of measles in the United States last week, and we have counties in New Jersey like Ocean where the vaccination rates have now fallen below what's required to maintain herd immunity. Should New Jersey parents be worried?
Yes. New Jersey parents should be very worried. We just had back to school, so many of the parents know there's a lot going around. Imagine if it was polio right now. We have, I think, over 10 cases of measles so far this year in New Jersey. We are the most densely populated state in the nation. If we are not going to ensure proper vaccinations for our kids, vaccines that have been going on over 50 years and have all but eradicated things like measles, mumps, rubella, and polio. Now we have babies dying of pertussis or whooping cough because people aren't getting their vaccines. These are eminently curable diseases, and we are allowing children to get sick and, yes, die because we are not appropriately following medical research, vaccine protocol, and as governor of this state, I'm joining the Northeast group of governors that is going to ensure that we follow medical guidelines and keep our kids safe.
The rise in things like measles, mumps, whooping cough, and the like are very, very concerning. And once we fall below the threshold for herd immunity, it's of great concern in the community. And so I support the vaccine schedule with regard to measles, mumps, rubella, whooping cough, polio, on down the line. We've got to get above the threshold for herd immunity to keep our communities safe. The obligation of any governor on day one after they take their oath of office is the public health and safety, and we'll do that under Governor Ciattarelli. I just wish my opponent showed the same concern when it came to biological males participating in female sports. We should be protecting all students.
So, Micah, that was interesting because they sounded like they agree on a lot more than they disagree on vaccines. But then that's when Jack Ciattarelli took a moment, and we don't have that particular soundbite ready to go. But that's when they really went back and forth on what he wanted to get out there, which was not a question about the evening about trans rights.
Yeah, and my students found that to be a very jarring moment. They said, "What does trans rights have to do with a question about vaccines?" I had to explain that sometimes when you're debating, candidates will do that. They'll finish that part and they'll say, "Let me talk about something else." It is abrupt, it's hard to follow. But here's where I think Mikie Sherrill had a very solid spar back and forth. And that clip did not include where she comes back and she says, "Well, that's interesting because on your website, you say that there needs to be vaccine choice for parents. And if we have vaccine choice for parents and it's up to parents whether or not they vaccinate their children, that's how you don't get the percent of the population protected so that you fall below that herd immunity level." I thought that was a very strong answer on her part. It was very detailed. And he didn't have an answer for that because, of course, he went on to pivot to this other subject.
Right, and that's a lot of times what candidates do, but they want to ensure they get that out. Is there a risk in doing something like that? Because it was at my discretion. I could have said, you know what, nope, we don't have time for that. We're moving on to the next question. But, it was spirited, yeah.
You could have. You let him use the time the way that he wanted to use it. But yeah, there's a risk in sounding like, there's more detail that you could have provided or put on the record as far as vaccines was concerned. You chose not to do that because you wanted to go to this culture war issue. And, it's an important one for him. He's clearly trying to capitalize on it the way that President Trump capitalized on it. That was an important issue for President Trump to drive out conservative voters across the country last year. And it worked for him. It has not always worked in New Jersey. In 2023, the legislative year, Republicans made trans issues very central to their legislative campaigns. It did not work in a single case in that year. It really fell on its face. So the question is it something that's going to work here? Is it something that is wise for him to follow that Trump example? Or is it something where he should have just stuck to measles because that was what we were talking about?
Yeah. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to look at what the candidates had to say about schools and education. Stay with us. Welcome back to New Jersey Politics. I'm Laura Jones, and Micah Rasmussen is my guest this half hour. He is the director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University, as we continue to take a look at the very first New Jersey gubernatorial debate. Now, Micah, we had a question from a student teacher about the federal Department of Education being dismantled. Let's listen to that and then get your thoughts.
As someone who is a student teacher currently at Fisher Middle School in Ewing, I'm curious as to what you will do as governor to continue to invest in education in New Jersey, given the dismantling of the Federal Department of Education.
That's a great question. And first of all, thank you. I have a middle schooler, so you're doing the Lord's work, I have to tell you. And they don't always shower as much as they should. So thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, the dismantling of the Department of Ed is a huge issue. This is one of the ways in which we're seeing a huge hit come into our state budget. It's why I fought so hard to say that we're going to claw back that money. My attorney general is going to sue to claw back as much money from the federal government as we can. We pay $70 billion more into the federal government than we get back as a state. So if they're not going to run their programs, they just need to send that money back so we can run them. And this is a real difference between myself and my opponent, who says he doesn't disagree with anything Trump's doing and that he's never going to sue him.
So what matters most in a child's education is that teacher, that family, who I hope is supporting the teacher and making sure the students doing everything when they get home. You know how difficult it is to teach if parents aren't fulfilling their responsibility, and of course that student. And the point I'm trying to make is the farther away you get from the classroom, the less impact I think any governmental institution has on what's taking place in the classroom and student learning. So I don't necessarily have a problem with the president and the administration downsizing the Department of Education. Just because they got rid of the Department of Education doesn't mean they got rid of federal funding. The funding is still coming, okay? And I'll fulfill my obligation as governor to make sure that our schools are fully funded, but we need a new public school curriculum to get our kids back on track, and we need more vocational training opportunities. That's what matters most in the academic development of our students.
All right, Micah, let me just get your thoughts, because, you know, they're looking at it from, they're trying to present information different ways. Jack Ciattarelli saying, well, just because they're taking it apart doesn't mean that they're going to be losing funding. So how did you think they handled the question?
Well, you know, I think implicit in this student's question is that dismantling the Federal Department of Education is going to have an impact. Clearly, he is somebody who studies this, and this was what bothered him the most as a future teacher. And does the state have it at hand? Jack is saying, we absolutely will. We'll take care of what we need to take care of to fill the void. Mikey Sherrill is saying there is a loss. And I think, again, implicitly, the student is sort of in his question saying, there's a loss here. How are we going to bridge the gap? And, you know, Jack's in a box here. Anytime there's something where it is a question about an impact of something that has been a Trump administration decision, he can't be critical of Trump. Normally, in a party, you could respectfully disagree. Trump doesn't truck any criticism. He doesn't expect it. He doesn't want it. You are incurring his wrath. You are potentially going to be blasted by him, you know, in a tweet if you do. And so you just have to sort of grin and grit and bear it. And that's what he's got to do. But Sherrill was free to say, yeah, there's going to be an impact here. And yeah, it's going to be adverse. And, you know, we have to acknowledge that. And so I think that was more along the lines of what this student was thinking and asking in the question.
Well, let me, before we go to our next soundbite, let's talk about the Trump factor. How is it affecting how Jack Ciattarelli is running his campaign? Because in the past, has he not been critical of President Trump? And now he's, you know, supporting the president with everything that he's saying.
I asked him about that. I said, you know, can you account for the change between 2017 when you were sort of a never Trumper and now? And I cited some examples how, you know, sincere New Jerseyans can't really get past these examples, like the January 6th pardons of police attackers and, you know, other questions of things that people say they can't look past. And he didn't engage. He couldn't engage because, again, you cannot criticize Trump if you're a Republican and be a viable Republican candidate. So his strategy is to pretend that Washington doesn't exist, that the president doesn't exist, right? To say, yes, I support the president, that's what he's got to do. The risk for him is that that's not enough. The risk is you've got a good candidate who ran 4 years ago and came very close to beating incumbent Governor Murphy in a much better environment. The Democrats were defending the White House 4 years ago. Today, you've got that same good candidate who's in a much less advantageous climate because they're defending the White House. And those are typically tough things for a party to do. So that's like sort of the mirror image of the advantage that he had last time.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to watch, the political strategy there. I do want to get to one other soundbite that we have, and it was when the candidates were talking about housing and overcrowded schools. Let's listen in and then get your thoughts.
First,
to make housing more affordable, it's accepted we have to increase its supply. That said, we know that when voters hear more housing, they become concerned about overcrowding schools. Would you support a state bond referendum to give the Schools Development Authority the funding to build new schools throughout the state?
No. What I will support is to make sure that government is working in partnership with the private sector to make sure that there's more affordable housing. And by the way, we need to stop. Right now, affordable housing is all rental. We need more lease to purchase opportunities. The next generation is doing nothing but renting because that's all we're forcing down their throat. And the reason I say that, Charles, is because I want to stop with us developing high-density housing in every one of our 564 towns. I want to use the shortage of affordable housing to get people to live in our urban centers again. I live in downtown Somerville. This town has gone through a magnificent transformation because we've gone up with low, moderate, and market rate units, and it's vibrant. What we're doing in Somerville is what we need to do on a much larger scale in Newark, in Trenton, and in Atlantic City. We've got to stop the exacerbation of sprawl. Anybody that's concerned about the environment should not be doing this. And by the way, you want the poster child? Why are we condemning a 175-year-old farm in Cranberry? Why are we condemning open space to build more high-density housing? I don't think so.
So that's a great question. I think what we all see here is too much of the money we spend on our education system is not going to the things we want it to go to. So for example, number one, students, educators, buildings, and we know how necessary it is because I'll tell you in Montclair, we had the stairway fall in high school. People couldn't go to school for several months. In Patterson, we've had the ceiling fall in an elementary school. So we have some of the oldest school inventory. We have to address it. But unfortunately, so much of the money is going to a bloated administration right now. We need to move that money into the places that we want to address. But you've also raised something about our state that I think is important, and that is about how we're going to develop it. And what we really need to do is have a statewide plan to protect our open spaces, because many of us know how deeply we really enjoyed them during COVID and how necessary it is for the health and mental wellness. That's why I've been a person at the Great Swamp Gala, as I've spoken there about how important open spaces are. So we need to do both, develop and have our open spaces preserved.
All right, Micah, how do you think the candidates answered that question?
Well, there's a little bit of an implication here when Jack says that affordable housing should be centered in our urban areas, because that may be something that suburbs that don't want the affordable housing, they may be attracted to that. They may like what they hear. The fact is that our affordable housing mandates that the Supreme Court has said have to be for every town are that every town has responsibility for building units. So towns don't love that. They don't want to be told what to do. So this may be music to their ears. This is a calculated decision that Jack is making to say, yeah, build them in the urban areas, build them somewhere else. The problem with that strategy is that, number one, the affordable housing that's being built is being built in the cities, by and large, and the cities can't handle all of it. They can handle what they can handle. And the second thing is, there aren't many towns across this state that don't have the infrastructure, that don't have the bus stop, that don't have the ability to absorb the affordable housing. I think that it is correct what the questioner is saying, which is that often now, I think a lot of opinions have changed here. Often now, it is the concern over the resulting cost. Are we going to have to build a new school? Are we going to be left to pay for that? So if those are taken care of, and towns' taxpayers are held harmless by affordable housing, by the state saying, we're going to take on that cost, then I think attitudes may have changed. Again, this is a calculated decision. Are we still a state full of NIMBYs, build it somewhere else? Or are we saying, yeah, we would build it here if it wasn't for the cost? So we've got to, one of these strategies is going to work. We'll see which one it is.
Yeah. And then, if you're a member of the audience, you might be thinking, well, what are they talking about that? Because there's affordable housing, and then that's housing that can be affordable. So
That's
just,
right.
and two different things. So
Yeah, and there has to be a consideration for if you're talking about a comprehensive housing policy, it's got to address renters, it's got to address affordable, it's got to address availability of mortgages, it's got to address housing, the cost of our existing housing stock, which is through the roof, right? Which constrains people from being able to get into the market. There's no such thing as a starter home anymore. So, Sherrill has talked about different segments of the market and the need to drive affordability at all segments of that market.
Micah Rasmussen, thank you so much for being a part of the debate and today's show. It's always good to see you.
You too, Laura. Thank you.
And that's going to do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.